mechanism that animals have, and even that human beings have. Now, a musk is a smell.
A what?
A smell that is released by an animal or an organism to create some form of boundary.
So, for example, yeah. By the way, if you're a graphic designer, if a graphic designer is listening to us, will understand this idea of masking. Masking is like covering. You cover something. When you see people drawing shapes and so on and so forth, they mask a part.
So there is an animal called the bushbuck.
Yeah.
The bushbuck is one, it falls in that antelope family of animals. Either it's a bushbuck or waterbuck. But one of the things it does to protect itself from being eaten by a lion is it will fart or just generally release a body odor that smells rotten.
Like Pumbaa.
Yes. Even warthogs do that.
Yeah.
And even men do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Metaphorically.
So the mask here creates an invisible
boundary don't cross.
of smell of don't cross here.
Yeah.
The same way the face mask.
So a mask is not necessarily a fragrance. It's what do they call that? It's an odor. It's not a fragrance.
No, exactly. It's an odor.
Yeah.
So when you combine these things, that sometimes masculinity, which they call toxic masculinity, is simply a mask to hide from the repercussions of authenticity.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted us to focus on.
Yeah.
But the opposite of being masked is being authentic.
Being open. I'm as open as a book, something of that nature.
So today we're asking ourselves.
But being open also means, at the end of the day, accepting really who you are.
Unmasked and unashamed.
Unmasked and unashamed. Naked and... I remember there's a time I was at Watoto and they were doing this... it's basically leaders normally meet. Is it on a Tuesday or something? They have a devotion in the morning. And so there's a guy who was leading the devotions and he was telling an MC of something of the sort. He was calling some guys to come and do some stuff. And then he's saying, before you can do whatever I called you to do, you should tell us what your favorite scripture is. So there's a guy who goes there. He's a radio presenter, very funny guy. He says, my favorite scripture is, they were naked and they were not ashamed.
And that's a very powerful principle.
Yeah.
Because the precursor to nakedness and shame was focus on good and no knowledge of evil. Not that the evil wasn't there, it's just that they didn't know it.
Yeah.
So because they didn't know that there was evil, they didn't know that nakedness was not normal.
Yeah.
You get?
Yeah.
It is in getting a certain type of information that now made them realize that, it's not okay to be naked.
Yeah.
Why? Because now the issue is inside. So they had to cover up with something on the outside. So what we want to come to as Solijamas is to bring as much as we can a community of men who are unmasked, who are naked and unashamed within a safe space. And that brings us to the first question. Why do you think men struggle to get help? Why do you think men struggle to open up and be seen for what they are? And if you can, what would you think are some of the things men hide behind?
Well, to answer your first question, in my thinking, I will say this. I will say that probably we've not created forums and platforms and spaces where this can happen. Like I told you, I was talking to a guy this morning and he's dealing with people who are recovering. And now that he has spaces that is open or is opening up, he's finding that guys are coming. And today we had to meet outside of that space. Because when he told them that I'm going to invite a guy, I'm going to talk to a guy on his podcast and so on, he said those guys told him, don't bring him here, right? Don't bring him here. I thought I was a journalist.
What if you find someone you know?
Exactly. Don't bring him here. So we had to change the location and we met someone else. But my point is that he's opened a space where men who are struggling with addiction, one or another, maybe drugs and alcohol, they're kind of finding help. So
kind of like what we're doing here at Solid Judgement.
Yes. Yeah. So the more people talk about this, and the more they actually provide spaces, physical spaces and emotional spaces and safety spaces, the more men will start talking about these things. Because you and I think if we do our research properly, it's not easy to find a show of this nature in this country, right? Where men are actually willing to talk about men issues, and we're not talking about how to please a woman in bed.
We shall come to that.
Which will come to that. Those ones are, to me, the front end. The back end.
The roots. We have to deal with the roots first.
Yeah. Because once the roots are sorted, then the fruits, they will generate themselves. So the first thing is, I would say, probably there are no spaces for men to really converse. Maybe just talk, and that's why we are starting Solid Judgement, and we want to see how it will pan out as much as possible. And of course, the initial thing we are seeing is that the responses to men are muted. The responses from men, they are muted.
Guys are there listening in Kamoli. You talk on it. And if you're one of those men, we would like you to reach out to us, still in your Kamoli, and let us know what you'd like us to deal with, because we're just beginning.
Yeah.
And much as we have this podcast planned out, a couple of seasons ahead, we are happy to take feedback and deal with what is fundamental.
Take a tangent so you can email us on solidjamas@gmail.com, or you can follow us on one of our social media pages, Facebook, WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp is not there. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, still growing. And drop in, even on the podcast, below this podcast, you can be able to leave your comment there. If you want your identity to be protected, that's where you can be able to send an email, and we can be able to deal with that. So, like I was telling you, I think it's an idea of developing. You and I have been discussing this for 4 weeks now, and I think we are looking at culture, the provision of such a space for men in terms of culture. And I wanted to ask you earlier on, you see how beautiful, I don't know if I can use that name, you see how beautiful is it Alcoholic Anonymous? Is that
Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yes. You see how beautiful that thing is. Have you ever taken some time to study how they do their programs and so on?
Yes.
You notice that at the core of all that is that they provided a space, and that space is not judgmental.
I'm going to say something.
The foundation is also accepting that you are struggling, right?
I'm going to say something that is going to sound very crude, but in its crude is where its truth is. The wisdom of God can be revealed in the fact that every human being has a smelly behind, however much they try to clean it. You understand that? Everyone has a smelly behind. There's something sinister going on behind everyone that has to be covered up. There's a stench in every human being. So now, to come to your question, the power of AA is that.
Yeah.
Acceptance and acknowledgement that every one of us has something sinister we are hiding that we'd rather not put out. Once you acknowledge that as fact number one, and then you find a group of people who are willing to see you for who you can be rather than for how you are at that particular point, then there is no judgment.
Does it also come and strengthen from the fact that the people whom you are meeting with also have smelly behinds?
Exactly.
So they are not like these sanctimonious, self-righteous, self-pure, highly super spiritual people who are so white and so pure. They've never sinned. They've never had a negative thought in their lives before.
Strange that you'd mention that. Recently I was going through a status of a friend who is a big social media influencer, and 2 people were asking for help for their son. 2 people were asking for help for their son, their adolescent son. But get what they said. Yeah, do you have a number of maybe a counselor or someone who does, can talk to my son? He's going through ish and on that. But then I do not want those religious people. It has to be non-religious. That made me ask, you want help? You know God is a true help. Why are you refusing the godly, maybe help. Not the godly, but the religious help?
But it could be because of maybe track record.
Because of who? Of God or of His people?
No. It can't be a track record of God, because people have killed in God's name.
Straight,
right? People have done weird stuff in God's name. I don't know if you saw the clip in. That's not God's name, but just how warped people are. It's an MP, a member of Parliament, actually, who wept in Parliament the other day.
Yeah, I remember
you saw that clip. How wicked or warped society is. A girl is raped, and the girl is forced to apologize to the rapist.
And how are they going to fix it? Do an R. Kelly.
You guy.
So, you see where I'm coming from, that even the people who speak for God are hiding something. So they can't be trusted.
So, I think we really have we're gonna need to bring some man or woman of God into this space to talk about this, because it keeps coming up from episode number 1. It keeps coming up that probably the help that is supposed to be obtained from the quote-unquote safety space of religion is not necessarily obtained. So probably it's because religion is looked at as a space for holy people, not as a space for
broken
people who can come and be made whole. And therefore those ones who have been made whole, they now understand one another. If you've ever read
but I want to first of all say, even as you hold on to that thought of Rick Joyner, if you understand that the church is a collection of broken people, do not be surprised when the broken people break others, because hurt people hurt others. Yeah, and because it's a place we go to get healing, sometimes the band-aid makes people think that they are better than others whose wounds are still gaping.
And so they judge those. That's what I was telling you about Rick Joyner. If you read his book, I think it's called The Final Quest. Either The Final Quest or The Call. He talks about an army, God's army actually. God's army advancing and so on. And one of the most sinister things he saw in that vision is the army attacking each other.
Straight. That's what's happening today.
As in wounding each other, shooting arrows at each other instead of shooting arrows at their common enemy. They're fighting one another. Probably that's why that guy told you that guy said that I don't want help from religion, don't want help from churchy guys, I want help from...
Because it might end up wounding them more.
Yeah.
What a thing.
Which is a sorry thing to say. But at the end of the day, it comes back to...
So where else are men going? In your experience,
you told me. I asked you that question. You told me the men go to the bars and so on. But for the most part, let me tell you what men do. They man up, quote unquote.
Whereby, strangely, man up also means mom
mask up. Yeah, mom up. Yeah, mom for the. I mean, in terms of keeping quiet, and also in terms of looking for mama.
We're going breastfeed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's two very powerful thoughts. So when a man doesn't find a place where he can open up and unmask and not be judged, he retreats.
Let's talk about Samson.
Yeah.
What do you think was Samson's root problem? When we read about Samson and we hear the tragedy of his death, having been caught up in Delilah's net, on Delilah's laps. But where do you think this problem started? Where was he wounded?
I don't know.
He was wounded at home in his first marriage, where his wife, whom he had been